Hello everyone, we're continuing our series of shows. With us in the studio is Dr. Michael Laitman. Hello everyone. And our topic for today is life and death from the perspective of the wisdom of Kabbalah, of course. If we look at what the old Russian philosophical encyclopedia says about it, life is defined as a form of existence of matter that is created under special circumstances. Living objects differ from non-living ones by having metabolism, the ability to reproduce, grow, move, and adapt to their environment. Do you agree as a Kabbalist with this definition of life? If we're talking about the form of existence of protein matter, then it's absolutely true. Yeah, of course. If we look at how life was created and how it developed throughout millions and even billions of years, then obviously it's true, it's correct. Meaning life is a method of existence, one of the options of possible existence of matter in our world. It's protein matter. But actually, it could be built also on other bases. But in principle, that's how it is. We're talking about the animate existence of the organism. What lies at the foundation of life? At the foundation of life lies the force that develops us, that develops any matter. In order for it to develop, for it to be able to absorb its surrounding environment for its future development. Meaning development in and of itself is the purpose of life. But, of course, since this development cannot be ceaseless and endless, therefore it is severed by particular death, but one way or another, this development goes forward. So what differentiates living matter from still matter? Only the desire to realize itself on a different, the next level, on a higher level. Okay, we'll talk about it some more a bit later. Now, in general about death, there's this well-known Latin saying that the only certainty in life is death, the only uncertainty is its timing. And really, a person doesn't need to know the time of his death. But it's interesting that our ego, our desire to receive, is built in such a way that a person feels himself immortal, especially at the beginning of his path when he's young. And suppose we're a person to buy a lottery ticket. He thinks that he'd win, even though that the chances are 1 to 1,000,000, etc. But when he goes outside, he never thinks that something might happen to him, where the chances for that are much greater. That's how we're made. What's the reason for this behavior of ours? In that we want good for ourselves and not bad, and therefore we incorrectly consider the circumstances, actions, etc. We always think that everything's going to be fine, as a rule. So the formula of maximum pleasure and minimum effort, it is the program of our existence. Yes, because all of life is based on going through states of pleasure, and that's how we're built. In every moment of our existence, we always position ourselves in the most comfortable state. Throughout the thousands of years of human civilization, there was an enormous amount of different beliefs. But the fact is that practically, in all beliefs, there is life after death. Practically everyone believes that there is life after death. What does Kabbalah say about it? And are you left with some kind of consciousness after death? Kabbalah says that the life and death of our protein body is not taken into consideration whatsoever. But life is the fulfillment or being fulfilled by the higher force regardless of what state our protein body is in. Meaning, there is the possibility, the option of acquiring the desire to bestow, to fulfill what's outside of yourself, coming out of yourself, of your ego. And when a person comes out of himself and wishes to fulfill others, then in that state he receives a fulfillment from above in order to fulfill others. And this fulfillment from above that comes through him and on to others is called life. So again, from the Kabbalistic point of view, what is that spiritual state of life and death? Not of the protein body. Life is called my desire to fulfill someone outside of me, practically everyone. If this is how I relate to others, and through them to the Creator, then in that case, through me passes an enormous light, fulfillment. And that light fulfilling me, that substance that fulfills me, is called life. And then what is death? Death, spiritual death, practically doesn't exist. In our world, we call life and death, we consider the life and death of our protein body. And in spirituality, in the spiritual world, death is considered falling from the quality of bestowal to the quality of reception. Meaning the desire to receive for yourself, to fulfill yourself, that is death. This is what man himself defines as death. Yes. So, if now all of us are in the desire to receive, then we're not living. From the spiritual point of view, we're not even dead. We simply don't exist. So dead is when a person himself determines that when he falls from the degree of life, then he defines it as being in the state of death. If he has attained the degree of life, state of life, and then he fell from that quality and the light disappeared, he says, then I am now in a state of death. And we're not in that. We're not in the one or in the other. In relation to these spiritual states, we're considered animals and not human beings. People. Meaning we exist only in potential. Yes, we can attain that degree, achieve it, but in the meantime, we're not there. Can we say like husband and wife, mom and dad that are planning to have a child? They're planning on it, but they're only still working at it. Meaning it's not even an embryo yet. Or rudiment. Right. Meaning we exist in potential and we have the opportunity of becoming human beings. Yes. What is the spiritual root of death? Crossing into a different state, another state. It's not death. Really, death does not exist. Death is what we consider as the lack of desire to bestow. That is the nature, or which is the nature of the Creator. And when it appears in us, we call it life. When that quality disappears from us, we call it death. Okay, I want to ask about our life, our world. We see that there are people that are living and people that die. In our world, everything happens in analogy to the higher world. Meaning that when in the spiritual world accumulate together the desire and intention, and in them appears the desire to bestow, the quality of bestowal, then it is called life. When these desires disintegrate, they can't connect between them in order to conduct the quality of bestowal and love, then their separation, the separation between them, is called death. Are there any special burial rites according to Kabbalistic rules? No, not at all. Altogether, Kabbalah has nothing to do with our body. It considers our body simply as an animal and doesn't speak about it in any way. Why is there fear of death? The fear of death exists because a person doesn't know what's up ahead. It seems to him that he continues to exist further on as well. The fear of death is probably due to The fear of pain, uncertainty, lack of understanding. I'll rephrase. Why does the Creator awaken in us the fear of death? Suppose we live in a reality where a person does not fear death. God forbid, no. Then a person wouldn't have achieved anything in life, any results. He'd just exist. The fear of death propels us from young age and onwards to attain something, the meaning of life. The meaning of life, to achieve, to reveal, to disclose. And we're people to live infinitely. Why change bodies? Were we to even live 1,000 years, then we would consider these 1,000 years as life, and still we'd hurry up to try to achieve and do something or not, etc. Meaning if it's finite. But if it's infinite, then we wouldn't have felt ourselves at all as subordinate to any forces, framework of time. Imagine that we'd simply exist as an organism that simply lives, exists, without beginning and without end. We can't even imagine such a state, because we measure everything according to exists, doesn't exist, exists, doesn't. I mean, every second something's born, something dies. And therefore, it's great luck that there's death, because actually it pushes us to attain life. What can you say about clinical death? People who went through it, they experienced very similar things. They see some light, tunnel. No, those are different physiological. They feel themselves outside their body. No, it's all physiological. I also went through it. I felt it on myself. It's different psychological metamorphosis that we go through in the state of clinical death, etc. It all has nothing to do with spiritual states. Can we say from the perspective of Kabbalah that tragical death is punishment for some kind of sins or something, or Kabbalah doesn't see it that way? No. We can't attribute it to any understanding of ours as to why did it happen, etc., and what happens onwards. No, not at all. A person needs to always feel himself as existing in a state of free will, free choice. What do I exist for? What am I living for? How to lift myself to a level where I will really make something truly beneficial out of my life. Can we say that besides the constant renewal of the Reshimot, from the Kabbalistic point of view, these are like informational genes of data, a person needs to change his body every a few dozens or hundreds of years in order to be born in a new environment, in a new body, in order to connect with other souls, people? Yes. Do I understand it correctly? Well, relatively. In our world, by our lexicon, we can't really express that which goes on in the spiritual world, but at least to imagine it that way to ourselves. It is at least true in that from that we begin to create some kind of calculation. What's going to happen to me? What am I supposed to do? What about me, etc.? Is it true that a person needs to die so that all of the accumulated knowledge and experience that he has accumulated in life, for it to turn into feeling? Yeah. Bala Sulam gives this example with the wheat, that the seed needs to rot and then a new stalk grows. This is how quality turns into quantity, or quantity into quality. So a person lives for 80 or 100 years, and everything that he has acquired, all of his experiences, it all incarnates into his descendants. Where is it all kept? It's informative data that exists in the informative field around the person. Is there one field for everyone, or each has their own particular one? No, each has their own particular one, and one general for everyone that leads all of us, because nonetheless we also see in our world the way that we develop, how all of humanity develops, is pushed somewhere or is pulled to something, but nonetheless each has their own particular fate. So what's left of a person who lived for so and so many years? Information. The information, what kind of information? It is emotional information, that is in so-called heart and mind, meaning the measure in which he has advanced in relation to others, the measure in which he brought himself and others closer, to which he brought everyone closer together. This is what's left of him. Again, the measure in which he has brought himself and others closer together in order to advance everyone toward the Creator. Meaning, any actions of a person to unite with others, that's practically the only thing left. Qualitatively, that's the only thing left because that is actually the purpose of creation. The purpose of creation is where all of humanity unites together into one whole, not into one piece of flesh, but one desire that consists of many, many different desires, but all of them are oriented toward helping each other connect. Meaning everyone has a different desire, but a single intention, which is to reveal the Creator. Yes, and if this is what a person's engaged in throughout life, these efforts of his, experiences, feelings, this is what remains and goes onwards. Yes, but if he's already engaged in it and hasn't yet achieved the goal, why does he nonetheless have to die and be reborn in a new body? That doesn't depend on him, but on the general state of humanity. I found this in your blog where you write that Kabbalists say that man's purpose is to achieve such a state where one doesn't feel life or death. If he still does feel it, it means that he still did not rise above his animate level and did not yet become a man. A man is he who exists eternally and feels himself that way. Can you please explain? He doesn't feel this world beneath him. He's on a level that is above it, meaning he uses this entire world in order to advance toward the spiritual world. And the spiritual world is the connection between us, where in that connection we reveal the general mutual force of good, kindness, love, called Creator. And what is the level of man? Being similar to the Creator. Adam in Hebrew comes from the word edamet, to be similar to the Creator. Similar in what? In the quality of love and bestowal. In that measure, we can talk about which of us and to what measure is a man. Is it correct that from the Kabbalistic point of view, a person who has achieved a certain spiritual degree, the degree of man, for example, nonetheless dies eventually and then needs to be born once again in a new body? It talks about the desire and the intention, but not the body. I mean, let's take, for example, Bala Sulam or any other Kabbalist. He dies, then he's born again. He goes through several stages. The first one is like any other person, an unconscious kind of development. Then, a few dozens of years later, he quickly becomes a Kabbalist, and then he continues and helps others. Is it correct? Very primitive. You can't even put it that way. Because there is something called Ibur Neshamot, the mutual separation and connection of souls, their movement, combination, and therefore we can't say that that's how it happens. It's not simple. Everything is actually much more complicated because it's a single system. Once we disconnect from the earth, from our world, we immediately become included in the upper world, higher world, and there are different states. There's no separation between souls like in our world, where there is separated by bodies. And when our bodies, meaning our earthly egoism, no longer exists, then the connection between the qualities of bestowal and love is different. It's possible to talk about it to beginners in order to somehow pull them a bit, but afterwards, gradually, it will be necessary to bring it into order and correct it. As I was preparing myself for the show, I noticed that in other mystical teachings, everything is very simple. Everything is elaborately explained about life after death and how it all happens. In religion, it's simple altogether. They simply describe to you the same life that you have here, with everything, with the same problems. Yeah, here they fry you, there they cleanse you. Yeah, there you have your family and everything. Everything that's habitual to a person here is simply passed on to there. But in Kabbalah, really, no matter how many times I read your answers, it's very difficult to understand. Take someone else's answers. Yeah, from the Ari, from other Kabbalists. But practically there are no explanations about incarnations, etc. No, because it's impossible to explain. I see. Gradually, a person comes to it and starts feeling certain movements inside himself. Grain by grain accumulate different feelings, knowledge, different definitions, and it appears. But again, once it appears in a person, truly, really, he won't be able to pass it on. He won't be able to correctly pass it on to anyone. And therefore it's written, and that shall be revealed to you, only you will see and no one else. Meaning, to explain to a person about life after death, no. But it exists. Still, what's the right way to relate to death? I think that the best thing is not to think about death, but to look at it as though we exist infinitely, eternally, and to make it so that this eternity, infinity, will be attained by us, at least partially, in our life, in this state, as we exist, in the way that we do now, that throughout this existence of ours, we will reveal eternity, wholeness, perfection, bestowal, love as the means for attaining wholeness and perfection. The Creator as the higher force that governs it all. This is what our advancement forward should consist of. And to think about the animate life and death, you need to examine yourself. Does it really bother you? And if it does, then it means that you're not yet seriously oriented toward spiritual qualities. When you're engaged in the spiritual, you're completely indifferent toward everything that happens with your body. If it lives or dies, you exist or want to exist in a state of the qualities of bestowal and love. But a person does take care of his protein body because through it he communicates with other people that still aren't in spirituality. Were he not to have this body, he couldn't communicate with them. I'm talking about the animate body, not the spiritual one. Right, I'm saying that a Kabbalist takes care of his animate body. Right, but only to the minimum necessary. The so-called bodily necessities. A Kabbalist is not afraid of dying like what will happen with his students, family. Students, yes. The family is something else, you need to think about it, but it's an ordinary earthly concern. And the students, yes, he needs to prepare them toward that they will practically remain with a good supply of knowledge, of the method, a laboratory that will be arranged out of them in a way that they will be able to experience themselves and go forward. We can say that there is a fear of death, but it's not egoistic. It's not the fear of death. It's a desire to maximally, a desire to leave behind you a world that is aspired toward the purpose of creation to the fullest. And in no other way. What else can you leave? Nothing else is left. Everything else, we see what happens to it. And altogether, the world and today's world, we're approaching a state where really a person will easily understand that the only thing that you can leave after yourself is in the form of good deeds. And these good deeds are accounted to you And this is a person's real gain throughout his entire life. And good deeds, as I understand, it's to bring other people to the revelation of the Creator. You can't do anything other good. Right, only that, to bring people closer to the Creator. Well, to naturally help with necessities, but today's civilization practically has all its basic necessities, right, and everything else is to bring a person closer to the Creator through the connection between people. Yes. Okay, today we talked about life and death, and still, choose life, as it says. Here before you is life and death. Choose life, meaning choose the quality of love and bestowal towards others. It's not simple. It is a choice that is realized above our ego. This is what we live for. We need to go through a lot in order to really become oriented in this regard, in order to prefer a life of bestowal, of serving others, in order to bring them, by serving meaning to bring them to connection between them, and by that to allow the Creator to appear among them. That is the purpose of man in this life, and this is what goes with him. Everything else is simply lost, and there's nothing else. We can't even imagine to ourselves the way in which the whole of creation is built outside of our current state. That, to begin with, is a lie. Completely not true, distorted by our ego, and therefore, if we could see, were we to have the ability to focus our sharpness, like in a camera, to what is going on, then we would see how our ego, if we decrease it or increase it, not quantitatively but qualitatively, meaning in coming closer to others or moving further away from them, not simply making it bigger or smaller, but coming closer to others or moving away from them, then we would have seen how different the world really is. Let's hope that it'll become known to us and will become revealed between us evermore. But for that, it's necessary to be in a group, in attain, and only there can we put together the model called life after death, or the higher world. It is in a group that aspires for attaining the meaning of life, and this is something that we can shape, still being in this world, in this life, and therefore anyone who has a desire for it simply needs to come to our group and participate in these practical studies, in these laboratory studies, and then a person will see that all this is very practical, attainable, and we're waiting for you. Thank you very much. Till next time, basic concepts in the wisdom of Kabbalah, life and death, all the best.